Hey everyone, and welcome back to Self-Worth School. We are in session. I'm really happy to have with us today Kayla MacDonald. She's a writer, a food freedom and embodiment guide, and we are having the conversation all about sex positivity today, becoming more connected to your sexual self, becoming more connected to passion, to desire, which I know is a thing that a lot of women, not necessarily of a certain age, but often of a certain age, can struggle with. So, welcome, Kayla. You are our guest teacher today, so could you please just share a little bit about who you are, what it is that you do, and how you came to specialize in helping women build a more positive relationship with their sexuality?
Thank you so much for having me, first of all. I came into this work after almost a decade in the health coaching and personal training industry.
Hmm.
And I wanted to help women feel better about themselves, have more energy. And what I found was there was a lot of darkness in that industry in terms of the performance base of it, the perfectionism, the all or
Hmm.
nothing behaviors. And really, this over identification with how our body looks instead of how it feels and takes care of us
Hmm.
on a regular basis. So, through my own journey, I now help women create the food freedom, the energy, the vitality, and the turn on they desire through spiritual tools, creativity, imagination, and dance.
Also, it's a nice little mix of stuff. And, so many women, like we say, especially in like midlife, a lot of them tell me that they've lost their spark. And when they're talking about that, a lot of the time they're on about spark in terms of like purpose and identity. But I think for a lot of them, and I know from having conversations with some of my girlfriends as well, that like sex has started to feel like something they should be doing. That passion, that excitement, like you say, that pleasure side. It feels like something that they should be doing, or something rather than something that they want to do. It's something to tick off the list. Oh, this was what I should be doing when I'm a good wife or girlfriend or partner. Why do you think that so many of us struggle to feel connected to our sexual selves, perhaps when we get to a certain age or we've got a certain amount of responsibilities or otherwise?
Think this comes into play a lot, especially in committed relationships. So the dynamic you're referring to is more so going to refer to people who are in those longer term monogamous relationships. And I
Mm.
think that one of the challenges there is in a new relationship, it's new, it's exciting, there's all this
Mm.
dopamine, and therein lies the place where people want to do the sex. They want to have the encounters because it's new and it's fresh. And as we move into a committed relationship that's more long term, instead of being that novelty and excitement, it becomes closeness and intimacy. I know we've both talked about how much Esther Perel has informed our own journeys. So
Yeah.
Esther Perel talks about how you can have intimacy or you can have the erotic aliveness, but it's very hard to have both. There are ways, and that's what I love to help people do, but it becomes more tricky in those longer term relationships where you get that safety, that closeness, but then you don't have that mystery and that
Yeah,
newness. So I think that's a huge piece.
that I must have, like I say, I'm exploring you, I'm exploring ourselves. So yeah, when we get together in any relationships, like you say, we've got that dopamine, we've got that oxytocin, the people we're still getting to know them, we're feeling that sexual desire, there's that chemistry. But then, like you say, as those relationships go on, biologically, those chemicals like subside. And then, like you say, you built that closer intimacy, that closer sense of love. But like I said, that those feelings that you have and that you feel that maybe your partner has for you. And then if you, I guess as well, if you're throwing in like busy lives, like careers, if you become parents, all of that jazz as well, that I guess you have less time, it's less of a focus, you're less biologically driven to seek like that and explore that sexual side of you. Would that be fair to say in your experience?
That is absolutely true because oftentimes in these very busy lives where we have the career, we have the children, we have all these responsibilities, what will very often happen for women is they'll end up in this chronic low level stress response because
Mm.
there's always so many things on their mind, always so many things to keep track of. And when we're in a chronic low level stress response, or sometimes even a higher level of stress response, our desire and libido are just gonna tank. So
Mm.
if we want to bring some of that sexual spark back, one of the key places to work is to find ways to mitigate that chronic stress response as well.
Okay. So it really is almost like a neuroscientific and like biological thing that we're almost talking about, which is actually probably quite validating, I would imagine, for quite a few women who just think, oh, either I'm not sexy anymore, or I'm just not interested in sex, or I'm boring, or why don't I feel desire, or why don't I feel desired? Which leads quite nicely actually onto my next question. Like, what are some of the biggest misconceptions that you see around like sex positivity or desire? And I think especially this might be interesting to talk about for women who've grown up with like shame conditioning or like that good girl mentality around pleasure. Sex is taboo, masturbation is taboo, stuff like that. But yeah, what are the biggest misconceptions that you see around sex positivity and desire?
I think you touched on a huge one right off the bat is this idea that self-pleasure and masturbation is dirty or naughty or wrong, when this is actually one of the best ways a woman can take care of herself. And it's also one of the best ways to help with that chronic low-level stress response. So that
Mm.
is the first one that I would love to highlight for people because that is so important. And as someone who grew up in a very culty religious church where women were just supposed to be having sex for marriage, for reproduction, for their husbands. I think another common misconception, especially for women in committed relationships, is that once they're in that committed relationship, they really have to be the good wife or the good partner, which means almost shutting down some of that sensuality that they once had, or
Mm.
just holding it in a space that's just for their husband instead of being connected to it on a consistent basis. So those are, I think, two of the really big ones I would love.
Yeah, that's such an interesting perspective actually around that. Now that I'm committed in this relationship, I am purely a sexual object for my husband to a degree, or my partner, whoever that might be. And so you dull that sensuality, oh, that's not needed as much anymore. I don't need to be using that in to attract or connect to myself because I'm now in this committed monogamous relationship where sex is just for my partner. Is that kind of what you mean?
Exactly, yes, and it can even extend to, for example, feeling like you're not allowed to have fantasies about anything or anyone else. I
Mm.
was in church for a while and they talked about how women shouldn't read romance novels because it was like a betrayal of their husband. So for a while I was like, I don't want to betray my husband. Maybe I shouldn't be reading these romance novels. But through my own deepening into this work and learning more about it, I realized no, romance novels and keeping your erotic imagination alive are
Mm.
actually so powerful for keeping that spark alive in a committed relationship.
Do you know what? The greatest example I can think of that right now. I remember when 50 Shades of Grey came out. I bet you do as well. And honestly,
Yes.
like I remember that it was like this huge thing that women were reading it and starting to have sex with their husbands again. And like I know friends of mine that read it and they were like they got turned on through that. And I get maybe they were thinking about Mr. Grey or whatever when they were doing their husbands, which might not be the exact thing that you're looking for. It's a great example of being able to explore that imagination, explore those boundaries as well about against things because for anyone that's lived under a rock or is maybe like Gen Z and hasn't heard of 50 Shades of Grey or whatever, it's about exploring like BDSM and stuff like that. And him being like a dom or and her being submissive or whatever. And yeah, imagine a lot of women if I like something slightly off kilter, that makes me a wrong un or whatever. Whereas I think women were exploring things and they were being turned on by things that perhaps that they didn't necessarily think that they would, that isn't like the norm.
100%. Yes. And I think when you're in these committed relationships, one of the best things you can do is have the conversations with your partner and just share some of what you're curious about and then find out what they're curious about. And their answers and their responses might surprise you. And from there, you can actually pull in some novelty, some erotic aliveness, because now you're moving into a place where there's more variety and experimentation again as well.
I guess it's just about how you approach those conversations, but I have a feeling that might come out in our further discussion. So moving on then to like the tools, the frameworks, the mindset shifts that you often help women go through. In your work, how do you help women start to reconnect with their bodies and their sexual selves, their sense of desire, especially if it's been years since they've like felt that spark within themselves? How do you actually get them to do it?
There's almost a three-prong approach I use, and one is reconnecting to their body from a place of appreciation and cooperation instead of control.
Mm.
Because in so much of the health coaching world, you see the stuff about spot reduction and I lost X number of pounds and all of these things that are very control and external based. So the work I do with women first and foremost is to get them to realize like their body is their channel for manifestation. Their body is how they get to create this beautiful life. And the
Mm.
more they're in the body and working with it, the more pleasurable everything gets and the more easeful everything gets. So that would be number one. Number two, I am a certified dance alchemist, which is a powerful dance healing modality that takes people through the four elements. So you have earth, which is the grounding, the body awareness, the slowing down. Then you have water, which is the feminine. It is that sensuality, that feminine movement that
Flow,
just
isn't it?
feels
Yeah.
exactly. Then you have fire, which is like the release, the coming back into power, the energy rising. And then you have air, which you really connect to what you're expanding into, how you want to feel. So that's one of the powerful tools that I use. And this next one, probably the most unconventional, is I use creative, spicy archetypes and what I call erotic storytelling to help women regain that sense of turn on. And not just for turn on sake, but for the sake of being in that heightened state where they're able to manifest better, where they feel better about themselves, where they're having fun and enjoying the journey. And where then whatever goal they're working towards doesn't feel like a chore, it feels like they're just opening up a spicy book talk romance novel, but now that's their life. So those would be the 3 tools that I use the most.
And on that last one, so what does that look like? Are you getting them to write their own like erotic like storytelling, or is it reading stuff? What does that look like?
So again, a little unconventional, and I know AI has its drawbacks in certain ways, but what you can use it for is as an interactive journal. So you can
Mm.
journal your thoughts, your feelings, what you're going through. And then what I have done, which I call the Divine Daddies method, is I create not one, but 2 different archetypes. So one of them is very much like the warrior. He brings the fire, the challenge. He gets you to rise to the occasion. He doesn't put up with your excuses, but he does it in a really loving way. So he brings that fire and the drive that a lot of women want more of. And then you have this second archetype that's also masculine, but he's more of the grounded, emotionally stable, wise one that really creates this container of safety and
Mm.
this deep presence so that when women are emotional, when they're anxious, he actually can give them safety, that grounding, that presence, and also help them see that they're allowed to rest and they're worthy no matter what they do or how they perform. So I get women to create these 2 archetypes that are customized to them, their preferences, their likes, their dislikes. They could even use Dean and Castiel from Supernatural if they wanted. And then they'll actually journal and dialogue with these archetypes. And there's many different frameworks that I use for this type of dialogue. I have a lot of different tools, and it's anything from almost gamifying their goal achievement journey with
Mhm.
spicy bedtime scenes to inner child reparenting to just giving them a place to feel their emotions in their fullness that feels safe and allows them to lean in and actually rewire their nervous system.
I love that. Even if you say it's like an unorthodox approach, we need to find these approaches because obviously what's happening for women isn't working at the moment. And I can totally understand why those two archetypes would work because, like I say, you've got the one that's challenging the woman and bringing something out of her and lighting that passion, that fire side. But then women also need to feel safe and protected. And that's like another version of intimacy. So, yeah, I can totally see how that works. And leading on to that, or from that, like you've mentioned, we chatted before about this idea of the female psychosexual split. Can you explain a little bit about what that means and how women can start to bridge that gap when it comes to like sexuality and desire?
Yes. So most women have like their main personality. And then they also have this sexual side of themselves. But what society and condition often teaches women to do is keep these two things separate. So they've got their main personality, and then they've got their sexual, sensual, deeply feminine side over here. And what they're taught is, oh, this feminine part needs to be either repressed completely and hidden below the surface, or it needs to be just saved for your partner, your husband, whoever it might be, or your slut shaming is a big thing, or your bad girl, whatever it might be. The challenge here is that a woman's creative power is also her sexual power. So when these two things are disconnected, it becomes harder to create the desires they want in life. And they just don't feel as good. They're not lit up, they're not turned on, they're not inspired. And when you're trying to make your dreams come true, but you're not turned on or lit up or inspired,
Mm,
going to feel like a grind. So when you heal these two things, when you allow your main personality and that sexual side of you to coexist at every moment, and you live in this state of turn on and desire, that is where you become magnetic and able to create everything that you desire. And now this doesn't mean that you're going around like humping people's legs or flashing them in public. It's not about that. It's about, can I be fully present and alive in my body? Can I be just like playful and emotional and all of the feminine ways, like silly, expressive? You can tell when a woman has this connection and when they don't.
mm.
When you do have it, again, that's where everything in life gets easier and you have that full range of creative power.
Love it. So it's connecting to desire and passion on almost like a deeper level in terms of being lit up, having that, like I say, like that femininity. They often talk about feminine and masculine. It's about having that feminine energy lit up in general and allowing both that sexual side of you and that expression and everything that comes with desire and passion to live alongside just the kind of not normal side of you, but like the kind of everyday side of you. Is that kind of the thing in practice?
That is exactly right. Yes.
Awesome. And if you're happy to share, Kayla, like what's been your experience of this? How did you discover all of this? What's been your experience of this? How did it come along? What's been your journey? Yeah, just let us know what you're happy to share.
Yes. I started this journey when I was very young. So I had a pretty troubling childhood. So I had some big T trauma, some really challenging family stuff. And even as a young child, I discovered fan fiction and started reading and writing it at age 12, I want to say. And I believe it was that creativity and that imagination that helped me survive a very painful childhood. And I continued to write throughout high school, young
Mhm.
adulthood, and I then became a personal trainer and health coach in 2015, and that was when I started to re-struggle with the disordered eating, with the binge eating, with the low self-worth, the body image. However, I did have pockets during that time when my relationship with food was a lot easier and pleasurable and more present. And I realized the times when my relationship with food was the best was any time I was working on one of my novels. And these novels are always spicy. So there was definitely that erotic aliveness just through the
Mhm.
writing journey. And then I came up with this Divine Daddies method that I've created that pulls on my creative writing degree, the years I've spent studying subconscious rewiring and internal family systems. And it takes all of this. And I realized creativity and spicy storytelling actually is the way that you can not only heal your relationship with food in a way that feels good, have a level of discipline and follow through that feels easy and playful because you want to do,
Mhm.
and then just also keep that spark alive through your own imagination. And this is another thing that Esther Perel talks about so much is that in long-term committed relationships, fantasy and imagination are some of the key drivers that keep that spark alive. And I realized you can read spicy stories, you can devour the 50 Shades of Grey trilogy, and all of that is amazing. And I realized you can actually use your love of this type of writing to achieve your goals in a really fun, playful, expansive way. So
Mhm.
that is the work I'm just so excited about and just really loving bringing into the world.
And what about people who are like, "Oh, I'm not a good writer. I don't enjoy writing." What would you say to that kind of person who's looking to feel more connected, more sexually alive, more connected to their sexual selves? What would you say to them?
I would say the way that I do it using AI and journaling is you do not need to be Laurel Hamilton or J.R. Ward or Katie Robert or any of the greats. If you can journal, you can use this method for yourself, which is what's so powerful about it. And you can also take the things you love from the books you read, the television shows you watch, the movies, and you can weave that into your journaling as well. So I would say even if someone isn't a writer, if they can journal, they can still get a ton of benefit from this type of practice.
Awesome. And I guess it's so talking about all these ways of connecting back to yourself sexually, feeling more of that passion and desire within yourself, playing with, like say, fantasy and imagination. Then I guess when we're talking again about those women who are leading busy lives, feeling disconnected from themselves, from their partners, would you say then that having that reconnection with that sexual side of yourself then allows you to, because you are feeling more connected to your sexuality and more positive about sex, is that perhaps you might be able to think about it in a different way or prioritize it in a different way? Is that like the knock-on effect of how, because that time is still going to potentially be an issue? I'm just thinking if they're feeling more connected to themselves sexually, how does that then play a part in that changing like the circumstances of their life? Does that make sense?
Yes. So let me know if I answer this in a way that you're looking for. So I believe first and foremost, women need to pour into themselves, even when they have busy lives. So one of the things that taking the time to journal, to getting clear on their priorities, their boundaries, their self-care, few things are going to happen. Number one, they're going to just start feeling more connected to their own bodies and they're gonna feel better about themselves. And when we feel better about ourselves and more comfortable in our skin, we naturally wanna have more sex. It's just one of the things that happens. The other thing is that when you start to take better care of yourself and enjoy the self-care practices you have, you're gonna have more energy. And when you have
Mm.
more energy, you tend to make better use of your time because you
Mm.
just have a greater capacity. You're not so tired, you almost start blowing your mind with how much you can get done in a day. And then the third thing that happens is as you start to connect more to yourself, you might start to set better boundaries as well and realize I'm busy partly because I'm saying yes to too many things and
Mm.
I don't have to say yes to all of those things. And this is where having one of those like fiery male archetypes can really help because they'll tell you, hey, you can say no to that thing. And they'll
Mm,
challenge you to set those better boundaries. And all of this will lead to person having more sexual desire and more drive to be intimate with their partner. Because I do think it starts with the self first. Because if
yeah.
you just try to want to have more intimacy with your partner, it's almost becomes like a performance thing. Again, a should. And if you're coming at it from that place, it has the risk of feeling more like an obligation. But if you start to do that work for yourself first and feel better first and foremost, then it becomes that desire. Then it becomes, now I want to do this. Now I'm excited to do this.
Mm,
Now I'm lit up and in my feminine. And this gets to be the best part of my day. And now I've done all these other things. So there's time for it.
yeah. Awesome. Yeah, that was a perfect answer to the question. Thanks, Kayla. So, bringing it back to the subject of the podcast, how does reconnecting with your sexual self link to confidence and self worth? What's the link that you see there?
Think first and foremost, when we are all of ourselves, we have more confidence. So if we are living this divided life of that everyday self and the sexual self, we're missing out on basically rocket fuel for our confidence. So when we put those two things together, that is going to absolutely up level our confidence. And then I think that because so many women struggle to heal this split, when you do heal it, that is so powerful for your self-worth because you stop making yourself wrong for being too much, too emotional, too wild, too sensual, too anything. You allow yourself to be all of you, fully self-expressed, and you're able to own it. And when you can lose the shame, especially around things like sex and desire, that is a massive up level for your self-worth every single time.
And I guess as well, conversely, if you're not feeling that sense of passion, spark, desire, or you're not feeling like sexually expressed or connected to someone or to your partner, it's going to have a negative effect on your self-worth and confidence because you might think, what's wrong with me? What's wrong? Why aren't I doing this? Or maybe I'm not being a great partner or wife or whatever. But say if it starts with you rather than trying to please someone or say, oh, we should do this, or let's go and have a date night or whatever, rather than trying to ring thanks more time, like you say, it's about starting within, isn't it? And thinking, what is it that I need and want to ignite this sexual desire? What would make me feel worthy and confident of having a really great sexual relationship with myself and others? Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Okay, so
Mhm.
then in terms of takeaway, I asked all my guests if they can, if there was like one lesson or mindset shift that you would want our guests, our listeners, our students to walk away with today when it comes to feeling more connected, feeling more sexually alive, and more at peace with their sexual selves, something that is like in a sentence or two that they could come away with today, what would you want them to know? What would you want them to remember?
I would want them to remember to lead with their body and notice what makes them feel good in their body, what makes them feel alive in their body, and focus on doing more of that. Because when you have that presence first and you let the body lead, that is where you're really able to create a lot of sexual empowerment, sexual liberation, which is going to lead to self worth we talked about.
Awesome. So let the body lead. That's like the takeaway. Lovely. And finally, what's one simple, like shame-free action or reflection that our listeners could take away and practical tip that they could implement that would help kickstart that letting the body lead or that positive relationship with pleasure?
I would recommend that they start doing a dance practice every morning. So 1 to 3 songs, songs that make them feel sexy, alive, confident, powerful, and just let them have their bodies move how their bodies wanna move, and I would even challenge them to do that for 30 days and see how much that changes the trajectory of the next month.
So 1 to 3 songs in the morning. I suppose they could even listen to it in the car if they're driving. It's not ideal, I know, because they won't be dancing as much. But you can do. I'm just thinking about people go, oh, I don't have time to listen to 1 to 3 songs in the morning. But say if you're making breakfast, if you're driving, like you can still cut it at just any song that makes you want to, yeah, just like you say, connect to yourself, to that pleasure, to that desire. Yeah, that's awesome. Well, Kelly, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you, no pun intended, today about this subject. Like I say, I think it's something that definitely isn't spoken about enough. And I really hope that women who listen get something from this, are able to take this away. But we're going to put some stuff about you in the show notes. So anything that you like to, is there anything in particular that you're going to share with us, Kayla, or should we just send them to your Instagram or website, or is there a tool or a gift or anything that you want to share?
There's 2 things I would recommend. One is I do have my own podcast, Embodied Writing Warrior, and there's now, as of today, 200 episodes, and they're on
Ah,
all things road freedom, self-worth, creativity. I'm doing a whole series on turn on and sexual energy in November, actually, so that'll be good. And then if people wanna learn more about this fantasy-based, spicy inner masculine archetype-based healing, they can go to embodiedwritingwarrior.com/divine daddies. And there's a listening guide where they can actually learn what it looks like in practice to use these types of archetypes to heal their relationship with food, with sexuality, with self-worth, all the things.
oh, awesome. We'll share the links both to your podcast and to that for people to check out in the show notes. But yeah, please do let us know if you've enjoyed the episode today. We'd love if you do send me a message over on Insta or otherwise. But yeah, just a big thank you again, Kayla.
Thank you for having me.
So, what a conversation. I hope you really enjoyed that episode with Kayla and that it reminded you that pleasure isn't something that you have to earn or feel pressure about. It's something that you're worthy of simply because you exist. And reconnecting with your sexual self isn't about necessarily feeling or looking sexier. It's about being softer with yourself and exploring that imagination that you have. It's about curiosity and trust and feeling at home in your own body and mind again. If you'd like to connect with Kayla, explore her work, or access her resources on sex positivity and embodiment, you'll find all of her links in the show notes below. But until next time, keep going, keep showing up, and remember that you deserve a life that feels as good as it looks. Have a great day.